Introduction. The hidden current. Before there were religions, there was an impulse. Before temples, before scriptures, before gods were named or carved into stone, something in the human being stirred. A pressure, a longing, a subtle pull toward meaning. Humanity did not begin its spiritual journey by asking what to believe. It began by asking a quieter, more intimate question. What is happening to me? This book begins there. It is not a history of religions in the conventional sense. It does not argue for one faith over another, nor does it attempt to dismantle belief systems through critique or comparison. Instead, it listens beneath belief itself, beyond language and doctrine, to something older, quieter, and more persistent. A current. Across continents and centuries, humanity has felt it, sometimes as fire, sometimes as law, sometimes as love, sometimes as terror, sometimes as transcendence. It has been given many names: spirit, God, breath, logos, prana, ka, chi, ruach, baraka. Yet beneath every name, the movement itself remains strangely consistent. Pressure leads to transformation. Loss precedes illumination. Death gives way to renewal. Forgetting is followed by remembering. Civilizations rise, articulate this pattern, and encode it into myth and ritual. And then, inevitably, they lose contact with the living essence that gave birth to those forms. What begins as revelation hardens into structure. What begins as fire becomes institution. What begins as liberation becomes law. And still, the current does not stop. It moves through shamans and prophets, mystics and heretics, poets and madmen. It hides in parables, dances in bodies, whispers in deserts, sings in forests, and burns quietly in those who sense there must be more than what has been handed down. This book approaches humanity's spiritual history through what will later be named the Zalsarian perspective, not as a new religion and not as a competing system, but as a lens, a way of seeing the underlying metabolic process by which consciousness evolves, forgets itself, and returns transformed. Zalsara is not presented here as invention, it is presented as recognition. A recognition that the same inner sequence has unfolded again and again. A seed awakens, pressure builds, forms crack, fire releases light, memory returns, and the cycle begins anew. These stages appear everywhere, in ancient Egypt's resurrection myth, in the Vedic cycles, in Taoist flow, in the Christ event, in Sufi annihilation, and in modern existential collapse. They are not borrowed from one tradition into another. They arise independently because they describe something structural about human becoming. What Zalsara offers is language for this structure. Throughout this book, certain terms will appear: seed, current, pressurization, forgetting, northern movement, light. At first, they will be allowed to breathe intuitively and poetically. Definitions will come later. This is deliberate. Spiritual understanding does not arrive primarily through explanation, but through resonance. You may recognize these ideas before you fully understand them. This work assumes something quietly radical, that humanity has not been spiritually ignorant, but spiritually amnesiac. That our crises, personal, cultural, planetary, are not punishments or failures, but symptoms of intense pressure applied to a species standing at the edge of another transformation. If that is so, then the collapse of old forms is not the end of meaning, but the beginning of its next articulation. The purpose of this book is not to convince you of anything. It is to trace the hidden current as it moves through history, and to invite you to notice where it may already be moving through you. Read slowly. Read skeptically if you wish. Read poetically if you can. You are not required to agree, only to observe. Because if the Zalsarian insight is true, then the deepest spiritual truth has never been owned by any institution, and it has never been absent. It has simply been waiting for the moment when pressure becomes sufficient and the seed is ready to break. The current moves again.